This weekend, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra Absolute Classics series begins with Soaring Strings, Mozart and Brahms. Led by Maestro Daniel Raiskin, the concert also features violinist Benjamin Schmid performing the Eric Korngold Violin Concerto. Both have joined me in the studio this morning. Hello to you both.
Good morning.
Well, Maestro Raiskin, I'd like to begin with you. This is my first chance to say congratulations on an outstanding opening night gala with Renee Fleming. That is a concert I'm not going to forget anytime soon.
Yeah, I can share this sentiment. All of us were completely blown away by this collaboration. She was both incredible as a performer and so gracious as a person. And we just had a chance to rehearse with her once, and then this performance really stood out, and everyone was incredibly inspired. And also that she donated so much of her time also the day after, giving this beautiful lecture, as I understood, which I had to miss heading back to Reykjavik for completing another project about music and mind. It was really a great beginning of a season that I think will continue in this direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, and now from having one of the world's best loved voices beside you on the Centennial Concert Hall stage to having one of your friends over your shoulder, that has to be very special too, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and not only one of the best friends, but also one of the best violinists of today, so I dare say. And I just figured out that it's... with time you get older, you start to reflect on your life, not in years, but in parts of centuries. So we've been together on stage for a quarter of a century now, and we met in 1994 in Austria at a music festival there. And I don't think that a season has passed that we haven't shared a stage in one way or another, whether chamber musicians or soloists or soloist and conductor. And this is an absolute privilege and joy to have Benjamin Schmid on his WSO debut here with me and in Winnipeg.
Well, I mean, I think we're all very, very excited about it. I'm curious, before we welcome Benjamin to the microphone, what do you remember about that very first meeting? Is there one thing that stands out, like perhaps his playing, perhaps, I don't know, a hairstyle or something exciting?
Both playing and the joy of meeting all these wonderful musicians, to joining this family. And actually during this festival, I met some other people who became an intricate part of my life for so many years after. And I remember we played a Shostakovich Eighth Quartet together, and I think Schubert Forlan Quintet, and it's just one thing led to another. And
I don't remember the pieces anymore, but I remember Daniel entertaining the whole group for days, and he was so much fun, and he was so young, and we were all young, and he had this curly long hair. And we ate a lot, we drank a lot. It was good times.
Well, Benjamin, I know you guys have worked a lot together in Europe. Is this your first time collaborating in Canada?
No, I've been to places in Canada, but Winnipeg is the first.
Yeah, with Daniel conducting?
No.
So that's very exciting.
Was I think Montreal with Storgats, and I did several places. Calgary and.
Well, I know you've performed with some of the world's most renowned orchestras, the Vienna, the London, the St. Petersburg Philharmonics, the Concertgebouw Amsterdam, and a broad range of repertoire. You're here in Winnipeg to make your Winnipeg debut with the Korngold Concerto. What can you tell us about the work?
Oh, a lot. It's one of my very favorites, and it's a piece that had a bigger renaissance as a repertoire work than any other concerto in the last 20 years. Everybody's playing it today because it's a very rewarding piece for audience, players, and orchestra musicians, everybody. And it has been denied for the longest time for some reason that we don't really understand, but it's been rediscovered lately very much, and it's a fantastic piece that stands for its own as one of the most attractive pieces in the 20th century music. But it's actually highly romantic. It's a post-romantic style that Korngold did, and I always call it some kind of third Viennese school, because Korngold found a way between Brahms and Schoenberg that was actually going somewhere very rewarding. And we love this piece. I've done it many, many times, and I might also have been part of the renaissance of that piece, being the first violinist playing it with the Vienna Philharmonic in 2004. So even this Austrian violin concerto hasn't been played by the Vienna Philharmonic for the longest time, and now they love it. Almost every season they play it.
Well, I mean, Korngold is just such a fascinating composer, isn't he? This kind of composer of both quote-unquote serious concert works and then also his film scores. And this work's a real sort of intersection of the two, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a piece at the peak of his capacities. And people always say that Korngold sounds like Hollywood, but I always say Hollywood sounds like Korngold, because he was really the guy who created that style, and we couldn't think of any Spielberg movie nowadays. I think if he didn't prepare all this musically that followed on later on, and this piece is a very nice synthesis of the two worlds of Korngold, his absolute music that he was brought on in Vienna in the early 20th century, being one of the biggest child prodigies ever. I think it was Gustav Mahler who called him the Mozart of today, and Richard Strauss made possible that his first opera with 13-year-old was premiered at the Vienna State Opera. And he was a big shot, an incredible talent. I just played his piano trio, Opus 1, which is the most complex work that he also wrote with 11, 12 years old. So he was quite something. Eventually then having a call from Hollywood and emigrating, and making a huge career as a film composer as well. But with this piece and the cello concerto and the F-sharp minor symphony, he wanted to get back to absolute music, and he did. Not so much in Europe; they kind of forgot him already. But now he is a big shot again, and I just must say it's one of the most beautiful pieces one can play on the violin.
It really is. And you mentioned it's sort of had a renaissance in terms of the work itself. And at this period, at this time, it's almost as if the Romantic Violin Concerto was going away. Critics especially were sort of dismissing it. And then Korngold resurrected it in this exciting way by also combining some of his own movie themes into the Violin Concerto. So it's just a truly fascinating work. Also, a work that was written at a time of great upheaval in his own life. Like you mentioned, he just made the move to Hollywood shortly before the Second World War and the outbreak. But really just a thrilling one for you to make your Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra debut with. Maestro Raiskin, I'd like to get you back on the microphone now. We just heard Benjamin Schmid telling us a little bit about the Korngold Violin Concerto. What can you tell us about Benjamin's playing of this concerto or his playing in general?
Well, I can tell you that as a player, as a violist, and before we started to work as a soloist conductor, we did a lot of playing together. I'm not afraid, and it's not a flattery. It's a true. As a player, he was always one of the true role models for me. And it's not only about the musicality and the actual playing, but the sense of thoughtfulness and discipline and in-depth why and how these things are happening was very fascinating to me. And with years, when we started to share stages, him playing violin, me conducting, it's one of the most rewarding relationships, because what we had as players exchanging dialogue on our instruments, violin and viola, whether again in chamber music or being soloists, continues its way in us working in a very natural way as soloist and conductor. So the amount of impulses artistically and musically you get as a conductor when you share a stage with someone like Benjamin Schmid, for me it's some of the most rewarding moments on stage. And he has, with that particular piece, he has spent so much time and so much devotion going around the world and playing it with probably over 100 times we figured out with orchestras around the world. I mean, there's not I dare to say there's not another violinist on the planet who has been so intricately involved with this piece and knows insides outs of it, and not only when it comes to violin, but to the textures of the orchestra and how this should carry the violinist. And orchestra feels this instantly, that they're in something special with a soloist who is embracing the thing as a whole and not just his part and trying to stand out and shine. It's an absolute piece of music, and the role of the orchestra in it is also very important. It's also very challenging. It's one of the most rewarding, but with it also one of the most challenging violin concertos, both for the orchestra and for the conductor to come together. And this is there's so much chamber music in it, but also so much orchestral virtuosity. I mean, some of the wind passages in the last movement in the beginning, when you pass on to them this first theme, I mean,
you have to always hold your breath. Would your band be up to the task? And
It's a rodeo.
it's a rodeo,
Yeah.
that's true. And this is where the phenomena of concerto, which is both a dialogue and a competition and sometimes even an angry quarrel, but the beauty of it is that the nature of it's always reconciliation towards a product you deliver together. So the result is always a path out of this friction, which gives a wonderful overall impression. And I mean, the sheer beauty of many passages there is just mesmerizing. And I completely agree. It's not that Korngold sounds like Hollywood, is that Hollywood definitely sounds like Korngold. And like him and people like Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, who actually was the teacher of John Williams and all these people, this great post-romantic European style, which found themselves in denial of the new Viennese school 12-tone way of composing. They somehow didn't have courage to leave the absolute beauty of romantic and post-romantic writing, clinched to it and brought so much into it themselves.
Well, it sounds like Winnipeg audiences are going to be in store for an absolute collaboration between the
sure.
WSO and
For
soloist.
sure, absolutely.
And with you mediating the whole friendly quarrel at times, but at other times a great
for
conversation, to say the very least.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you both so much for coming in this morning. It's been a pleasure to welcome you into the Classic 107 studio, Benjamin Schmid, for your Winnipeg debut. Maestro Raiskin, always lovely seeing you.
Thank you very much.
So you can see soloist Benjamin Schmid performing with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, led by Maestro Daniel Raiskin, this weekend in Soaring Strings, Mozart and Brahms, with the Korngold Violin Concerto. Tonight and tomorrow at the Centennial Concert Hall, 8 p.m. For details, visit wso.ca. And just before you both go, I've got a selection queued up from a 2009 recording with you, Maestro Raiskin, leading the Rhenish State Philharmonic, featuring Benjamin Schmid on the violin, performing the final movement to the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. What can you tell us about this work, Benjamin? And this recording, is there something you remember about this particular collaboration?
Of course I remember it. I mean, Mendelssohn is one of the most perfect violin concertos ever, and this third movement is a Sommernachtstraum Musik, and it's an absolute hit, and we performed it many times together, and I remember this session as one of the most rewarding I ever did. I'm keen to hear it again.
Well, here it is on Winnipeg's Classic 107.